Hey guys, it's Sam. Welcome back to the channel where I help you learn how to live your best blind life. We are back with another episode in our Working Blind series. This is a series where we talk to amazing VIPs in the community who are working in hopes of inspiring you guys as to what types of jobs are available to us.
A cartoon of a man sitting at a computer typing on a keyboard. The view zooms out and we see dozens of other identical men working in office cubicles. The screen goes black. The words "Working Blind" appear in green, typed out as if on an older style computer.
So we've got another good one for you today. I'm actually here with a friend of mine, a friend of the channel. You guys have met him many times before. Mystery Caller, will you introduce yourself, please?
I love being called a friend of the channel. My name is Danial from Life After Sight Loss.
Yes, Derek. So Derek has a channel, Life After Sight Loss, where he talks a lot about inspirational stuff. What would you say? I'll let you describe it.
Sure. At the end of my channel, I always say we do life advice, encouragement, we do some product reviews, stuff like that. I tend to focus mostly on people losing their sight and going through that from sighted to visually impaired like I was. So it's mostly that stuff, the emotional turmoil that, is faced with that. And that's mostly what I do on my channel.
Perfect. Yes. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because it is a job. Some people think it's a hobby for us, but no, it is a job. And so we'll talk about that. But first, Derek, why don't you tell everybody about your vision loss, what it's caused by, what's your current status, your acuity and all of that?
Sure. So I have something called Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, or LHON for short. Basically, it damages your optic nerve, so my central vision is gone. I think actually you and I have similar sight loss as far as like what happens.
Yeah.
So I have no central vision, vision on the side, a little bit, it's blurry. As far as my acuity goes, I don't know, it's something bad. It's hard to judge. You go in there and they're like, "Can you see this?" I'm like, "No," and they put their fingers up next to my eye and that sort of thing. So I think at one point it was like, my left eye is a little better than my right eye, but I don't have much distance. But like with anything, I've learned to adapt. So my vision seems better to sighted people than it really is, probably. But no central vision. That's really the main thing.
Yeah, we're very similar in that regard.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you do for, other than YouTube, we'll talk about that, but what do you do for a living?
Sure. So I work at a church. My title at the church is worship minister, although anybody watching this who does ministry knows that you do 1,000 other things that are not on your job description. But that's my official title, is worship minister.
Okay, and how long have you been doing that?
Well, this job, I've been there, I started in January of 2020, which was a weird time to start working at a church because COVID was like 2 months later. But I had done this job, a long time before that, for 15 years before that, at other places. But this one I've been working for just over 3 years.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the hiring process and all that because I remember it. We talked a lot during that time. And we'll talk about accommodations and all that. But as far as you said you've done it before, what kind of, is there any kind of formal training you had to do? Education? Did you go to school for this? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. It depends on where you work. There are tons of churches, denominations, mainstream, local, independent, things like that. So it really depends on where you want to end up working and what branch, if you will, that you end up working in as far as education. I think education is always important. And so for me, I didn't necessarily have to have any formal education, but I had a lot of on-the-job training from, think of it like I was kind of an intern at a church, and then I just followed around the worship minister or the pastor or whomever and did what they did, went on visits with them, learned from them, that sort of thing. So mostly it was on-the-job training, and then I did have some education when it came to some other parts of my job as well, which I'll get into as we go along.
Yeah. I know at one point you did like marriage counseling and stuff like that. So did you have any kind of training or education for that?
Yeah, so I actually do. That's another part of my job that I do. I do counseling, Christian counseling. So I did go to school for that. I had a degree in Christian counseling from a Christian college. And I do, like you said, marriage counseling. I do, just kind of basic stuff. I always know where my lane is. I stick in my lane. I don't do, I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that. It's basically stuff where, family problems, things where people are trying to grow in their faith or grow in their maturity, emotional health, things like that. I focus on that within the church. So that did have formal training that I went through before I started the job.
Okay, yeah, and I know you do a lot of the social media stuff or the videography at the church, right?
I do, yeah. We do video announcements every week. We do videos for different events and announcements. And one of my friends and I work there together, and every time we have an event and we want to get volunteers, we make these dumb videos to encourage people to volunteer. And they're always this last one, for example, we're having an Easter egg hunt, and we were doing a video how we needed volunteers because it was just he and I out there throwing eggs around, and it showed us throwing these eggs, and then we would cut to different scenes where the eggs were hitting, and scenes that were like nowhere near us, and the eggs were like on top of a roof and hitting a building, and so it just really dumb stuff. But yeah, I do all kinds of stuff like that. I edit, film, make sure that all that stuff is handled as well.
That's funny. So then that brings to the question of how do you do all this? How what kind of do you use? Any kind of accommodations? Any kind of special systems that you have set up in order to do your job?
Yeah, so I use as much as I can. I'm a Mac, Apple person, so I use all the accommodations on my phone, on my Mac, iPad, Apple Watch, all that stuff, all the built-in accessibility features. And I use magnifiers. I have an iPad I think it's the Patriot Pro. I think you did a review on that at one point.
Yeah.
I use that as kind of a, travel CCTV kind of thing, if you will. And then I use big whiteboards. I have because I have remaining vision, I do a lot of contrast. So yellow paper, black marker, something like that. But for the most part, it's all the common stuff you think. I think 20 years ago, there would have been like huge monitors in my office and all this other stuff. Now, if you walk in, you don't really even notice because everything's so built in with a lot of the technology until it comes to things like reading music, which you can do. There are ways to do that, and you've talked about that, but I sort of just memorize everything. And if I forget, it's part of the quirkiness of me. Like, oh, what lyric will he forget this time? But yeah, I use all the normal assistive technology that somebody would use.
That's a great point. You mentioned that because it's like it goes back to the whole don't sweat the small stuff. Yeah, you're gonna forget something every now and then, but who cares?
Yes. That's right.
In the grand scheme of things, you're having fun. Everybody's having fun. Who cares?
Absolutely. And honestly, like, it's funny now because we talk about it every once in a while, like in our practice, because I do rehearsal every week. And so I'm like, well, I know about 3/4 of this song up to this point. So just keep singing. If I stop singing, just keep singing and I'll pick it back up, And so it's kind of a joke that, and usually if there's a female leading the song, it's probably because I don't know these lyrics. So she's going to lead it for us. I don't want to embarrass us all by not knowing the lyrics. So
that's funny.
It's a fun time.
So then how about your YouTube? And this kind of ties in with, editing the videos and stuff at the church. Yeah. What kind of accommodations or how do you do all of that?
Yeah, so I do videos and I have a podcast on the channel as well with my wife. And, it's similar stuff. I record. And as far as assistive technology, I zoom in to edit everything. I know some people use screen readers to edit. I do want to figure that out in the future because who knows, as you get older, of course, Sam knows how it's like to be old. No, as you no, just kidding. No, as you get older, sight tends to dwindle. So I'd like to learn that, but I do my magnifiers and as far as the stuff I use, the cameras and mics and all that sort of thing, it's pretty normal stuff. I try to keep my setup simple so that there's not as much that can go wrong in the midst of things because I'm visually impaired. So I try to keep it simple, and that way, my videos aren't super flashy and the podcast isn't super flashy, so that I can make sure at least I'm in frame and it sounds okay, that sort of thing.
Consistency is more important over
absolutely
flashy.
Yes.
So at the church, I'm curious about lining up your shots and stuff at those, like the Easter egg thing. Does your friend do a lot of the recording or setting up and then you do the editing, or how did that work?
Yeah, so there's a group of us, there's about 3 of us who go out and film, and usually 2 of us are in the actual video, and then the other one's helping to make sure things are in frame or moving the camera or something like that. So because we do, like in my own personal environment, like in my house, I kind of know where the camera needs to sit. I kind of know how high the tripod needs, that sort of thing. But we go all over the place, and so I'm not sure exactly. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to set it, and then they know how to move the tripod and get it in frame, and they know me well enough now to know kind of what I'm looking for, and so that way when they film, it's like, okay, this is what I wanted. So yeah, they're definitely use that sighted support as much as I can.
Yeah. Okay, and so then during the hiring process, this is a question that a lot of people have asked throughout this series.
Sure.
And incidentally, if you guys would like to see more episodes, you like in this episode and you'd like to see more in the Working Blind series, you can find the playlist in the video description. But when did you divulge your vision impairment during the hiring process? At the beginning? Did you wait till you had the job? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So it was interesting with this one. I'll tell you kind of both. With this one, I knew the people that worked at the church because my kids had went to the daycare that the church has. So I kind of knew them ahead of time. So they actually knew I was visually impaired, before I even went in. But I had interviewed at other jobs before this one, and I always let people know up front that I was visually impaired. Like I would send a cover letter with the resume, and I would have a little paragraph about my vision loss in the cover letter. Because from my perspective, I always wanted people to know way up front. I didn't want them to think I had lied to them or anything like that, because you just never know what people will think. And so I figured, look, if they're not going to hire me because I'm blind, that's discrimination. And so that they can't possibly do that. And I wanted them to know so that when I came in, that would be on the table, and then we could just sort of get over it. Because it's like, look, I know it, I can't see, I got it. Here's all the things I do because I can't see, and now let's just move on and move past it. As opposed to it being this big thing like, you got the job, and I'm like, by the way, I'm blind. And they're like, what?
This is my guide dog.
Yeah, P.S., here it is, That way, too, they could ask questions. I remember one interview, they said, well, okay, how do you use a computer? And I was able to, show them, for example, they had a laptop there, and I could, zoom in on it and show them sort of the built-in things and say, like, here's how I use my phone. And it was like, oh, okay. And it really wasn't a big deal because people don't know, because they've never, impacted somebody who's visually impaired. So they were like, oh, okay, cool. That makes sense. And they move on past it. Because technically, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think technically we are required to divulge that we are visually impaired in the interview process.
No.
I don't think that's required. But for me, I just felt like I didn't want them to think like I was like, surprise, gotcha. I didn't want that moment. Now, everybody's different, but for me, I let them know right up front.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp as you. No, we don't have to tell. You don't have to tell anybody. You can.
That's right.
Go interview, go to your job, work there for 20 years, and never tell anybody. The problem is that if you don't tell them, then they are not required to give you any kind of reasonable accommodations. So that's kind of the catch-22. If you want something, you need something, you have to tell them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of that, you lost your vision, I know, in college, right? And you had jobs before that. So can you tell us about that? What kind of jobs did you have prior to losing your vision?
Definitely. So I worked, I've done ministry most of my working career in some way, shape, or form. I worked at a small Christian school. Like I said, I've done music, and I was a senior pastor for a while. So I've done sort of all the levels of ministry in different positions in different ways. But the job I had when I was losing my sight, I actually worked at a theme park, and I did entertainment during the day. So I did the live shows, I sing and dance, and did costume shows and character shows and things like that. So I worked at a theme park for summer, a summer gig for, a total of about 7 or 8 years on and off. So I was actually working at that when I lost my sight, which was always interesting because, like, how are you going to dance? It's like, well, you just got to figure it out. And I ended up working there longer visually impaired than I was sighted. But yeah, that's been my main job. I worked in entertainment, and then I did ministry for the rest of the time.
That's cool. So that probably prepared you for, all types of performing in your later careers and stuff.
Yeah, in ministry, I end up, I do the music every Sunday, I preach occasionally, things like that. And while I am always cautious to say I'm not faking anything on the platform, the entertainment certainly has helped me be a little more engaging, lively. People always say, I really like your energy. I'm like, oh, okay, great, because I know how to sort of, bring that level up a bit so that people are engaged and interested. And that all comes from my theater and entertainment background.
Yeah, that definitely comes through in your YouTube and your podcast as well.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So, final question. How has your coworkers' reactions been towards your vision loss? Especially someone that wasn't there in the hiring process, maybe a colleague that you just met and they found out. Have you gotten any negative situations or comments or anything like that?
No, actually, my colleagues have been great. In fact, one of the people I work with, I do the videos with, he started at the same time as me. We actually met on Sunday morning at a church service in front of everybody. We're like, hi, nice to meet you. It's kind of weird. But now he and his wife both work there, and they've been great. I actually ride to work with them every day. So I let the dog goes in their car, all that sort of thing. So they've been wonderful. Everybody. The only thing that has happened at all is people are just not sure about my vision. So they're like, how much can you see? What should I do? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. It's just they're trying to figure it out, and it's a good conversation to have. And I make jokes from the platform on Sunday mornings. I'm like, okay, how many of you like this? I'm like, don't raise your hands. It won't matter. And you hear about 90% of the crowd laugh. And then there's those few who don't know it yet. They're like, "What is this a joke? I don't understand." So as far as my coworkers go, they've been fantastic. I've never really had an issue with coworkers, having trouble with my sight loss. Because I'm a big jokester and I joke about it all the time, and it's kind of like it's not a huge deal. So yeah, I've had lots of positive experience over the years.
That's good.
Yep.
All right, so I lied. One more question. I just thought.
Okay, I'll take another one.
Yeah, and this one, Derek hasn't seen this one yet, but so it's kind of it's not too hard. So, what would you say is the most important thing about working as a VIP? If you had to give advice to somebody who was thinking about it on the fence, what would you say is the most important aspect of working as a VIP?
Gosh, yes, give me the hard one that I haven't seen yet. That's what I
And we'll be right back with the next answer.
We'll be right back. Gosh, I think, as far as giving advice to somebody, the most important thing, whether it's going through the interview process, whether it's, working at your job, I think here's the thing. Know what you do well. Know what your strengths are, no matter what it is, because people might look at you and be like, oh, they're blind. I don't know. It's like, yeah, but I know what I can do. I know what I bring to the table. For me, walking into a job in ministry, I know what I can do. I know that I can be effective in this job. I know that I might have my own sort of weaknesses other than sight loss. I know my strengths and weaknesses. I know myself well enough to know that when I'm sitting in that interview and they're like, well, we're not sure about this or this, I'm like, yeah, but I know that if you give me this job, it's going to be this and this. It's going to be good. So yes, the sight loss will play a part, and we have to accommodate for that. But know yourself well enough to know what you bring to the table, so no matter what they say, you can be positive in what you're going to do for that job.
Yeah, that's a great point, man, because unfortunately, you've got to know, because unfortunately, sometimes you have to convince others of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they have doubts, even though you don't, they have doubts, and you got to be like, no, this is how it is, like you said.
Yeah, it's like give me the chance, and I will prove that I can do this job. Not only do it, but do it well. So no matter what you're going into, know what you can bring to that job.
Yeah, and that goes hand in hand with being an advocate for yourself and all of
Absolutely.
that.
Yes, definitely.
Perfect. Okay, guys, if you're interested in seeing Derek's stuff, Derek, how can people find you?
I'm on YouTube, Life After Sight Loss. If you go to YouTube and just search Life After Sight Loss, you'll see my videos, my podcast. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Life After Sight Loss. I used to have a website, but it became such a hassle. So I was like, forget it. I was just gonna, post my videos and go to that. So yeah, if you want to find me anywhere, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, just search Life After Sight Loss. You can find my podcast, Life After Sight Loss Radio, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, I use Overcast. Somebody uses Pocket Cast. You can find it pretty much anywhere that they are doing. And I noticed YouTube rolled out a new playlist feature called Podcasts, and I think they're pushing it to YouTube Music, so I might be there as well. I'm not really sure, but I think you can hear me on Alexa, Google, podcast. Anywhere you get a podcast, I'm sure it is there.
Okay, all right. Now you're just bragging. Come on.
Yes, thank you. I know how to push a podcast.
Did I mention Derek has a podcast?
Did I mention that? In case you're wondering, I do have a podcast, yes.
Yes, awesome. All right, Derek, man, I appreciate it. Always a good time having you on. And like I said before, if you guys would like to see more in the Working Blind series, check out the playlist down below. Tons of really awesome interviews, lots of great information. But that is it for this one. So Derek and Sam signing off. Thank you, Derek.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we will see you guys in the next one. Or I will. Derek won't be there, but I'll be there.